All right then. Good morning, everyone. Great to see you. I realize I got to put my earbuds in. Hold on for a second so I can hear better. There we go. Much better. Good morning to all of you, and I hope you're all having a great morning in spite of the late or the October heat, late in the season heat. Before I jump into starting this event, well, actually, I'll just welcome all of you. Welcome to Words Over Time. We're going to have our intergenerational dialogue about the politics of identity. That's our theme for this session and for this term. Before I forget, those of you that are in my Wednesday afternoon class, that would be the Cal students, can you please go into Zoom and put an S after your name? I see some of you have already done this, but if you could all do it, because the OLLI support team has to figure out how to get a good mixture of Cal students and OLLI members into the the breakout rooms. So please go into your Zoom settings and put an S after your name. That would be extraordinarily helpful. All right, then, let's see. Everybody has their cameras off, or most people have their cameras off, it looks like. So, okay, I'll have my camera on. All right, so the way things are going to start today is I am going to unveil the results of our survey, first of all, and have a few comments to make. And then after that, what we will do is we will go into our breakout rooms. We're going to do 2 sessions today. After each session, we'll come back from the breakout rooms into Zoom, and we will, in essence, debrief each other. What do the different groups talk about and things like that. That's the way today's event will work. So go ahead and sit back, get yourself comfortable. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just kind of go through the results of the survey and also say a few comments about why we're, what we're doing here. Here we go. So words over time, intergenerational dialogue. I've been talking, I think, nonstop all week. Politics of identity. So as a reminder to everybody who's here, and I'm so happy you're all here, where did this intergenerational dialogue idea come from? When did I start it and why did I start it? And what happened is I was giving a lecture one day, and it was actually a lecture for an OLLI class, and this is after the November 2016 elections, when especially in the Bay Area, everything felt divided and raw and angry. And I just kind of threw this idea out. Is it the freight and salvage? And basically said, what I'd love to do is I'd love to get the OLLI folks and the students from Cal together in the same space and talk some of this out. And there was an immediate, positive response. I thought, let me try to make this happen. It was about a year in the making, but here we are. This is about, I think this is like the 4th year I've done this. This time around, we're talking about the politics of identity, and part of the emphasis here is trying to have a civil discourse. If we disagree on certain things, trying to be able to talk it out instead of that impulse to cancel or to shut down and things like that. So that's one of the reasons we're here. We're also here. Sure, the politics of identity is about diversity, but this whole project is about diversity. It's about one aspect of diversity that we often forget about, which is age-related diversity. Having people from different age groups in the same space is just as important as having people with, different heritages and different backgrounds and things like that. And so that's one of the many reasons we are here. Okay, the survey. Now, I will say this: I was somewhat surprised, although I still think it's true that because this is part of the Berkeley community, I think we're more likely to agree over generations because of the nature of the politics of the Bay Area, but there are some significant differences, and I will go over those. Just want to take a few minutes to do this. So I will transfer these into a PDF, and I will share them both with the OLLI folks and with the students in my Wednesday class. So no need to kind of scribble all this down. I'll just go through this relatively quickly, and then we can take our time and go over them perhaps a little bit later on our own time. So here we have, which of the following best represents how you feel about the use of race in college admissions? What's interesting on this one, this was one of the ones where there was quite a sizable difference, is the much larger number of UC Berkeley students rather than OLLI members who thought that race should play absolutely no role. Almost 20, about 23% of the Berkeley students, undergrads, said it should play no role. The only one that seems to have been comparable is that limited role seems to be the closest we can get in terms of agreement. Equal to other factors, a much larger share there from OLLI members than we have at Berkeley undergrads. So interesting difference though in those who think it should play no role. OLLI members are down around, looks like 4% thinking that. Here we go. How do you feel about woke? Positive. OLLI members have a higher percentage. This also surprised me a bit. About 42%, 43% of OLLI members have a very positive response to the term of wokeness or woke. Berkeley undergrads, about 26%, it looks like. And then we have this neutral category, mostly Berkeley undergrads. And then the negative attitudes, there's slightly more OLLI members on this. But again, the big difference here is the positive aspect. I somehow thought there'd be a higher percentage among the Berkeley students, but not so much. Very sensitive issue here and controversial for some. How do you feel about transgender women participating in sports? Not allowed was the smallest response. We had more from OLLI members, but we also had over 10% from Berkeley undergrads. Only in non-physical seems to be roughly the same. And participating in all sports, higher percentage from the Berkeley undergrads on that response. So maybe not all that surprising there, and not too far off in terms of the percentages. This is very, very close. This is about the acceptance of the use of preferred pronouns and thinking it should become standard. Maybe a slightly smaller percentage, looks like about 8% less among the OLLI members, but for the most part, in agreement on this. Even so, it looks like around 26% and about 33% of OLLI members said they disagree that preferred pronouns should be something that we accept as kind of standard in social interaction. Look at this, almost complete agreement on this, and the same thing. Have the politics become a very divisive issue in the US? And it looks like we're almost completely in agreement in terms of percentages. Only about 10% or less in each category thought it hasn't become that divisive. We can talk about why when we get into our breakout groups. Here we go. Which of the following best represents your perception of the relationship between race relations and identity politics and democracy? Huge agreement for the most part that this has to be addressed, that we're not going to get better quality of democracy until we find a way to address race relations in a constructive manner. A smaller percentage thought it was an obstacle. Actually, interestingly, about 7% of the undergrads thought there was no connection between the quality of democracy, basically, and race relations. But for the most part, there seems to be a core that agree that we simply have to address this for American democracy to improve in quality. Which of the following represents your view on gender-affirming care? Almost the same number said available to all without exception, and that is around, I'd say, about 14%. Then we have a much higher percentage of OLLI folks saying, under 18, but only for reversible processes, so no surgical interventions of any sort. Then under 18, without any kind of medical treatment, only emotional or mental support. That's roughly a similar amount between the two groups. And then under 18, no care of any sort. Looks like about 4% of the undergrads, and I'd say about 2% of the OLLI members thought that was the way to go. So disagreement here, and certainly some differences in percentages, except for the ones that said available to all without exception. It looks like a lot of folks chose not to answer this question too, which I think is interesting. That's how we only have this going up to 50%. So maybe it's too controversial to even try to answer. Don't know. Now, this one is interesting too. Which of the following best represents your view on age-related self-identification? So only Berkeley undergrads, no OLLI members said they identify strongly with their own generation. But the largest two were either somewhat identification, with the blue representing some difficulty understanding other generations. That seems to be about the same amount in both categories. And then somewhat, but age differences are not significant, seems to represent the bulk of the rest of it. Not identifying with generation, less than 10% in both categories. So the next up is going to be something, I'll explain what's going on here, and I may have to actually add something that explains how this is. SurveyMonkey got a little bit weird on this question. This was the one that asked you to pick up to 3 categories and then rank them, with number 1 being the most important category, and how you self-identify. And what SurveyMonkey did is it took all the categories and turned them into rankings. And so the way you read this part, and it's basically broken down into 9 questions, even though it was 1 question, is that the green part represents the percentage of people who listed whatever category we're in. This is ethnicity, race. The green part is anybody who listed this as the most important. So for instance, 40% of undergrads put ethnicity, race as basically their strongest preference, whereas 15% of OLLI members did so. Then you get into blue, and then you get into yellow. So even though it's the key says ethnicity, race, age, and gender, the colors actually represent the rankings. And then anything after yellow is just SurveyMonkey redistributing the percentages. So you have to kind of just look at it from green, blue, and yellow seem to be the categories that matter most. So this is ethnicity, race, strong response from Berkeley undergrads. Here is age, equally strong, or I should say in reverse proportion to the ethnicity, race, very strong for OLLI members, less strong for Berkeley undergrads in terms of age. That age doesn't seem to be that important. It seems to get, I guess, more important from the size of the green and the blue and the yellow. It seems to get more important perhaps as we do age. Gender, much stronger among OLLI members, well over twice what we have under the Berkeley undergrads, about the same who ranked this number 2. And then we have, again, a bit more in terms of OLLI members identifying this as either 1, 2, or 3. Sexual orientation, this is quite interesting. So that became apparently, according to my reading of the results, there were 0 Berkeley undergrads who said that sexual orientation was either 1, 2, or 3 in terms of how they rank it in terms of their identity. But it did come out that there were at least some percentage. It looks like about 1 or 2% among OLLI members, and the same is true of ranking at number 2 or number 3. Now, in terms of being number 2 or number 3, that's yellow, and then blue, that would be much higher, I guess. So it's important, but it wasn't number 1 for Berkeley undergrads. Religion, interesting, lower numbers definitely in terms of 1, 2, or 3 on this. Nothing over about 25% of the undergrads, and even lower for OLLI members. And yet, interestingly, there's another question on religion we end with, and it basically shows a different side to this. So this was also interesting. Country of origin, nationality. Berkeley undergrads, well over almost 3 times as many said that was important in terms of ranking at number 1. So, some interesting differences. OLLI members, not that it wasn't important, but far fewer chose this as the most important category of being. School alma mater, this was not surprising. Here we have green. Nobody chose green, so nobody made this number 1, but in terms of at least being in the top 3, Berkeley undergrads probably 4 times higher, but still under 10% that your alma mater really mattered in terms of how you identify yourself. So this apparently not all that important. And then this looks like everybody chose none of these categories matter to me, but that's actually not the way this works. It just means we got, it looks like around 18% of the undergrads and about 16% of the OLLI members decided that this was at least in the top 3 in terms of how they self-identify, that these categories are not how they identify. That's how you read this. Last question is this. And this is why I think this is interesting. Which of the following best represents your view on religion in the United States? And then in terms of positive, look what we got. We got a much higher percentage. It's still only around 11%, but it's a much higher percentage of Berkeley undergrads who think that religion is a positive thing in the United States. Far fewer, I'd say about a third of OLLI members felt that way. In terms of negative views, a much higher percentage of OLLI members have a negative view of religion, much smaller view of Berkeley undergraduates. Then problem only in politics, looks like not 100% agreement, but there's more OLLI members that feel it's problematic within politics, smaller number of undergrads, and then of course the less religion, the better. Both OLLI members and Berkeley undergrads had some agreement that that was the best way to go on that. But again, we have less than 50% because a lot of people just didn't answer this question. So, which is unfortunate because getting the results really helps us. All right, then. So again, I went through that relatively quickly. And let me get out. I'm actually going to keep the slide up for just a second while I show you the first question. The way things are going to work now is I'm going to get out of sharing my slides here in 2 seconds. And then I'm going to put up a question. And what I'll do is I'll show it to you, and then I'll copy and paste it in the chat so you can keep looking at it. And you don't have to necessarily stick with the question in the sense that this is a question that's meant to get some discussion going. The first thing you should do when you get into your breakout rooms is you should introduce yourself. And we're going to try to have at least 2 undergrads in each of the groups. So introduce yourselves to each other. And this is a question I'm going to come up with. And if you want to stick with the question, great. If your discussion goes in a different direction, there's nothing wrong with that. We're just talking about the politics of identity. So here's the question that I've come up with for our first breakout session, which will last around 20-25 minutes or so. What do you feel is the most difficult issue to discuss in relation to the politics of identity, and why? Is it, because some of those questions, not everybody answered, and it's possibly the case that the reason they didn't answer is because, well, maybe it's just one of those things that's like, either I don't know where I stand on this, or possibly it's just one of those questions that I don't want to answer because it's just, no matter how I answer it, I feel uncomfortable with it. So, what issues make people most uncomfortable? I'm going to put this in the chat right now. Leave the question there. There you go. So what questions are most difficult for us to talk about? Whether it's the issue of participation in sports or anything else. And the reason I start with this is because it doesn't mean you have to talk about those issues, though you're more than welcome to. I am curious to see, however, which conversations feel most difficult for you to start, especially with people that you may not know, and why are those the most difficult issues? So there's the questions. Let me check in with our wonderful OLLI folks and see if we're ready to start the breakout rooms. Rob, are we good to go?
Yeah, we're just about there.
Or Max,
since
sorry.
I formed the breakout rooms, some people have arrived, some people have left. So I'll throw you all in there now. If there's some latecomers, I'll then put you somewhere. If you don't have any students in your rooms, then we'll just take it from there. So, wow, people are really making my job hard here by coming and going. So let's just do it, see what happens.
Okay, thank you, Max. I think everybody's back now, I believe. All right, so welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had a few minutes. What I'd like to do now, however, is since we all did disperse into 2 separate breakout rooms, if any of you would be willing to kind of share a few things that came up in your discussion so that we could all, hear what you had to say in case there's, differences between the groups. And I'll start with, let's say, OLLI members. If you'd like to let me know, what you talked about or any surprises in your conversation, anything like that. The easiest way to do this is to raise your hand, raise your Zoom hand, which you should all be experts at this point. But you raise your Zoom hand by going to the reactions. You click on reactions and it says raise hand, and then you just raise your hand, and there it is. So anybody have anything they want to share from their discussions? Anything surprising, anything interesting, anything entertaining, anything you just like to share with the rest of us from your particular group? And I'll start with OLLI members. Anybody want to add anything in? And if you can't find your raise hand, let me know. I'm going to start here with Michelle. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Michelle, and start talking.
All right. Just one of the issues that came up was about gender, pronouns, and identifying oneself with pronouns. And I brought it up, and the 2 Cal students who were in our group, I thought, oh, for sure they're going to jump all over me. And instead, they said, yeah, you know, there are things about that I don't get it. And this, I feel like there's a divisiveness. There can be divisiveness about this. So I was really surprised.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Michelle. Appreciate it. Next up, we have Jackie, and then I'll go to Mariam. So, Jackie.
Hi, we had a great discussion. It centered on how hard it is to talk about anything because people are so divided. But we had one international student who brought up the idea that she and her friends think the system is such a mess that many of them considered not voting as a protest. So we had some pushback on that from OLLI members.
Okay.
And it was just wonderful to hear. Yeah, I feel like it was really good discussion.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jackie. Mariam, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. I was in Michelle's group, actually. I was one of the Cal students that she mentioned that agreed with her. And I just thought it was so interesting because not everyone in our generation comes off as radically as everyone portrays on the internet. I think our generation has a really bad rep online because we're always the people online being like, well, you offended me, and I would like things to go this way and stuff. But I think when we sit down like this and all have a talk, our views are not really as divided as are portrayed. And I really enjoyed my conversation with Michelle and the rest of the OLLI members in my group, because I think we were able to show them that the generational discrepancies are not as big a gap as everyone thinks.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that insight, Mariam. Appreciate it. Daman, you have your hand up also, so unmute yourself and go right ahead.
Yeah, so I was actually the only student in my breakout room, and it was actually really interesting to kind of come to an agreement with the OLLI members that we kind of focused on the idea of like race relations and the admissions process, and we kind of agreed that it should kind of play a role just because the fact that on the application you're able to select whether or not you're Asian or African American or whatever you identify as. But I kind of introduced the idea that it's what matters is how you kind of explain yourself in the application, whether that's through the personal statement, PIQ, the personal insight questions. So we kind of agreed about that. So that's pretty cool.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Daman. Anybody else have anything they'd like to share out of these groups? Just in case either, a summary of what you talked about or anything that came up that surprised you. If not, I'll keep looking for a raised hand. Believe it or not, we're already at 11:15, actually 11:16, 11:17, it just you clicked on. So we have time just for about one more breakout room. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to throw out, you can continue your discussion if you want, because you're going to go back to the same breakout rooms. And if people join in late, what we'll do is we'll keep adding them into, so if somebody jumps into your breakout room that you haven't seen, it's probably because they joined late, and just let them introduce themselves and things like that. But I'm going to throw out a different question in case you would like to start your conversations fresh. And what I'll do is, instead of just bringing up my slides and doing all that, I'm just going to post it in the chat this time. So let me send this out to everybody. And here's what it looks like. The question is, do you feel there's a significant difference in the way different age groups view and experience the politics of identity? And if so, what are those differences? Going back to Mariam's point about, of discovering that there really isn't that big of a difference. That might be, where your discussion goes. That that what a surprise is that you thought there would be differences, and what those what you thought those differences would be, but they're not actually there. It's really up to you, where you take your conversation. But anyway, there we have it. And what I'm going to do is we're going to send you back to the breakout rooms. It's about 11:18. We'll do maybe another 20 minutes in the breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and not only do a second debriefing like this, but also kind of have a general discussion if anybody has any questions, and then that'll take us out all the way to the end of the event. So there's your question. And like I said, there's no restrictions on where your conversation goes. So the main thing is just, enjoy yourselves and get to know each other. All right, Max, I think we're ready for our second breakout sessions. All right, then. Always happy to see that. Just under 20 minutes left in our event here. So I want to do a couple of things, one of which is, as with the first session, if any of you would like to share what came up in your discussions with the rest of us, if any of you, have any insights or questions to throw out there, please go ahead and raise your hand on Zoom, which you can do by just finding the reactions button and then raise your hand. I'm happy to have you, share your thoughts or things like that. And then after that, I got a couple other questions I want to ask everybody as a group. And if you have any questions, also feel free to put them in the chat. So I already see a couple of hands up. I'm going to go to Valenstein first and then to Trinity, and I'll just go down the list. So Valenstein, yes. Are you there? You may have to unmute yourself.
We had an interesting discussion about the waning influence of education about civics and government, and whether that is responsible in some sense for issue-based politics to be giving way to identity-based politics. If we don't know how the government works or used to work and function, are we less likely to have conversations around issues and interests, and more likely to default to our identities and just trying to accumulate enough political power to dominate on all issues as a result of forming an identity group that's in the majority or plurality? So it's an interesting discussion.
Great, thanks very much for sharing that insight. So much to talk about there. Trinity, you are up next. What would you like to add to our discussion here?
So we slightly went off topic, but we were talking about like somewhat of, well, one of the OLLI members described it as a doom loop, how like this, because they were asking me about civic engagement. I was the only student, so not to represent all students' mindsets, but they were saying how, asking about this generation and voting and like how we feel. And I was kind of saying how I think a lot of people, a lot of us just view the system as really problematic. And even if we take one step forward, it's 4 steps back. And we lack the ability for collective action. And that's hindering a lot of us from being able to, I guess, see like a light at the end of the tunnel. And we kind of were discussing the economic differences in generations, like what they were able to buy and do in previous generations. And this generation now would also like help develop our differences. I think that's a bigger differences between the generations and what we're experiencing today and previously.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think you're spot on with that too. So we got 2 hands up left. I'm going to go to Daman first and then Ronnie to you. So Daman?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting to learn. We don't really have that many opportunities to like come together as like, coming from different generations. And we also definitely talked about voting. And, it's always like we kind of separate ourselves based off identity, which, is definitely important, but we kind of overlook the idea of like what actual issues affect everyone, because there's definitely like income inequality. It's not just something that impacts like younger generations or older generations. So I think it's like when we're talking like younger generation tends to like overlook those, and like we don't really kind of take voting seriously. So that's kind of like one important takeaway, that we need to take voting a lot more seriously.
Yes, I'm very sure that the OLLI folks set you straight on that. So thank you, Daman. Ronnie, what would you like to add to our discussion here?
I began to think that one of the skills that we're not trained in from a very early age in public school is how to have productive conversations where there are differences in thinking, ideas, and what to do next to make it better. We're not trained in that kind of good discussion. And that came to me over the past 2 weeks, just listening to the news of what's going on in Washington. But that's all I have to say. I think we need more training to have civil discussion with some kind of productive upshot.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ronnie. And by the way, Berkeley undergrads, here's a selfish plug for my class in the spring semester. I'm teaching a class called Political Discourse in the 21st Century, which was also a it was an OLLI class, and I taught it for the undergrads last spring for the first time, and it's going to be back. And that's exactly, it does exactly what Ronnie was saying we need more of, and that's why I put that class together. So if you're thinking, what will I do in the spring? Ask me about it. I'm happy to talk more about that. All right. Thanks to all of you for sharing your thoughts. We've got a few minutes left here. So I want to go back to, and again, feel free to add comments in the chat too. If you don't want to, raise your hand, that's all good. I want to go back to two, kind of central issues here where there were some differences, I think, in the poll results. One of which was race, the topic of race, and the other that, was the topic of religion. And I'm curious, there was a, I know it can be a personal question to answer. For instance, I'm not asking what does religion mean to you. You don't have to take it as a personal question, but I am curious if anybody would like to speak about, for instance, either in terms of the consideration of race in college admissions. There was at least a significant percentage that said we should not consider it, or else how you see religion. There was not that I expect Berkeley students to hate religion, but it was interesting that there was quite a few strong response that religion was a positive thing. And if you want to speak to that, please do. Got a couple of hands up. We'll also keep monitoring the chat as well. So I'm going to just take them in order. Deborah, you are up first. Please unmute yourself and feel free to join in.
Religion is a hard topic for me. Grew up Catholic dad, Presbyterian mom, became a Unitarian at 20, stayed there for 49 years, and then had to leave last year because it became so politically divisive. I called it authoritarian left. And I just have such strong feelings that religion is where we talk about ethics and let individuals do their own activity. But when a church told me how to vote, or that I had to defund the police, or I had to do other things, it was such a turnoff. And I'm sad that I'm unchurched for the first time in my life, but I really want separation of church and state.
Okay, understood, and we'll keep that discussion open for now. I'm going to go next to Rachel. Would you like to add, Rachel?
Yeah, so I was raising my hand to also talk about religion, and I totally understand Deborah's point, and kind of my interpretation of why maybe Berkeley students viewed it more as in a positive light is because just in general, our upbringing was more secular than I feel like in the past. I think in the early 80s, 90s, even internationally, there was wars fought amongst divisions in religion, where I feel like our upbringings and the differences fought in international wars kind of have other underlying issues. And personally, for me, I think of religion less as the institution that I'm a part of. So whatever temple I'm attending at that point, but more of kind of a set of morale to bring to every situation in life. It doesn't have to be religion as in my one place and what they're saying about religion, but more as a kind of set standard of how to act and how to behave on life. And that's why I personally find it as a positive thing. But the same way I do completely support separation of religion and state. It's just a more kind of, I like the morale of it. That's my whole point.
No, thank you, Rachel, for sharing that. That really adds a lot to the discussion in terms of where these answers are coming from. So I appreciate you sharing that very much. Three more hands up. I'm going to go to Dana, then Ann, and then to Shelley. So Dana, you're up next. Please unmute yourself and join in.
So I'm one of the people who didn't answer the question on the survey about religion being a positive or negative, because it depends which one and which people. I don't mean literally which religion, but which branch, which
Okay.
Because I've read things by Christians who complain that many Christian churches have become wings of the Republican Party, probably not so much in Berkeley, but in other places. And on the other hand, I have actually the opposite experience of Deborah, because I joined a synagogue a few years ago for the first time in my life because of its engagement with social justice issues. And so it's a big there. I feel like in religion, there's the whole spectrum that there is in politics. There's not, yeah, it's all of those things.
Understood. Again, thanks for adding that to the discussion. It gives us that much more to think about. Ann, you're up next. Please unmute yourself and go ahead and join on in. Ann, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I was surprised that so many young people voted for religion in the survey. I thought that that had died a few decades ago altogether, but it's the people I follow. I mean, I was raised Catholic, so of course I had to rebel from that. But with the, advent of the New Age and all the Eastern philosophies coming in, our generation just had a whole lot of other ways to look at the moral life than, the organized religion. And so pretty much my teachers all see it as pretty patriarchal and authoritarian, also part of the system that has to die, and all of these things are crumbling. So for me it's deeper, that's an inner thing, and that it shouldn't be regulated by anyone's rules, but just what you choose to follow morally.
Okay, thank you, Ann, for the insights. We got two other hands up. I'm going to ask you to be relatively brief, Shelley and Lisa, just because we're almost out of time here. So Shelley, go right ahead, unmute yourself and join in.
I get very offended hearing when people say religion is going to teach me how to be moralistic. And there's so many different ways to figure out how to live one's life, and it doesn't come from religion. And I sure the heck don't want my government to tell me how to live a moral life.
Okay, thank you for adding that. And we have one hand up left, and that's Lisa. Go right ahead.
I wonder if we can tie this together with what struck me in my group, which is there is such a hopelessness of the younger generation, my own kids included. There is this economic lack of mobility. There is climate change. There's so much sort of ennui and helplessness and hopelessness. I wonder if religion is what's left.
That's an excellent insight. Thank you for that, Lisa. And I think, it does go back to something Rachel pointed out, which is, if you are feeling adrift a bit, which could be, post-pandemic, there's so many reasons to feel like that. I mean, I don't want to say religion has all the answers, but there's a sense of, I think Rachel called it prepackaged. It's like it's a community. It's a place of belonging that's beyond just, whatever belief system is there. So I don't know the answer behind this, but I appreciate all of your insights, everyone. Also want to point out, Jackie has posted in the chat, and I read this article. David Brooks wrote this article in The Atlantic about how we need to restore moral education in the U.S. It's called "How America Got Mean" in the September issue. And so I'll see if I can track it down and share it with everybody, at least in my class. Okay, so we are in our last 5 minutes, and let me tell you where things go from here. So OLLI members, you're going to be getting a message from the OLLI program, and so I meet with the Cal students every Wednesday from 2 to 3. We have a wonderful discussion. Unfortunately, the room doesn't get great air circulation in terms of, so hopefully the day won't be too hot, but you'll get an invitation that says, if you can, please join us for those sessions. We can keep the conversation going. You'll get it'll tell you what classroom we're in and what time. It's 2 to 3, and it's in 140 Social Science Building. So you'll get that message, and again, if you can't join in one week, maybe you can come the next week or something like that. We'll be meeting pretty much every Wednesday. That's where that's going to go to my Cal undergrads or the Cal students in my class. Thank you so much for being here. It's been hopefully, it's been a great experience for you. That's what I hope. So we'll meet, of course, next Wednesday as usual at 2:00 in our room. So having said all that, let's just call this the opening to a larger discussion as opposed to just an hour and a half where the door gets closed and we all go our separate ways. Let's not go our separate ways. Let's kind of see if we can figure out how to walk together. I'm also going to ask Susan if she wants to say a few words before we sign off here. Susan, would you like to add anything?
I only to say that thank you for everybody. I think that these kinds of dialogues not only take an open heart, they take an open mind. And I feel like we've shared things that really matter to ourselves, and we did it. Most of us are among strangers. And so I feel great hope after these conversations, and I hope you do too. And I think, Darren, let's continue doing words over time. It's the best thing that happens. So thank you, everybody.
Yes, well, thank you for that, Susan, and I'll go ahead and wrap things up. We'll keep doing words over time in the future, and everybody, let you get back to your days. Thank you so much for being here, and keep that sense of hope alive, and I'll see everybody hopefully sometime soon. All right, take care, everybody.